You know, since we've been staying at home, I have started taking lots of walks, and I really like these pathways. I thought, why not start a series of paintings, just landscapes, and from these pathways and sceneries that I see, beautiful nature. So for this video, this is what I'm going to paint. Hello and welcome back to another video. To start my single point perspective landscape painting, I need to start to define the horizon line first. So using my reference photo that I showed you, I'm just going to define that line for myself and the main elements that are in this photo. I have to just remind you that the reference photo is just what it is called. It's just for reference, and I'm not going to paint exactly what I see in that photo. I'm going to make my own additions and be creative with this painting. And I'm just going to draw some guidelines for the beginning or to start my painting. I usually don't like to use a pencil for drawing because I feel like it just smudges around, and since I'm using acrylic paints, I can always paint over anything that needs to be correct or if I make any mistakes. So what I do, I usually just pick a darker tone color. For instance, here I'm using an ultramarine blue, and I dilute it with some water, and I just use a very low opacity color pretty much to make my guidelines. And as you see, I'm just doing very quick lines. I'm not going into too much details because these lines will be all going underneath layers of paint. And then what I do, I usually start my landscape paintings from top to bottom. So I like to paint the sky first. In my reference photo, the sky is pretty much just white, but I like to add some blue to my sky. So I'm just adding some ultramarine blue and some phthalo blue to make my sky a little bit blue. And now I'm going to work on my ground and this pathway, and I am just adding some gray, or what I do, I mix the white with a bit of ultramarine blue again and a touch of red, and if you have black you can use black as well to make my gray here for this pathway. And now I'm gonna work a little bit on my ground, and so there's a lot of grass on the reference photo that I'm looking at. So I'm just gonna start with the color that I see that is underneath everything else. So the base color is gonna be more yellow, and as I work on this painting, I'm just going to add green tones on top of it. So as you see, I'm just working in layers. For this layer, this is just the base of everything, and I just want to fill up my white areas so I don't have anything white showing through. And as I progress, I'm just going to start defining the light and shadows, or light and dark areas, to make it very clear where the light is falling and where is the darkest spots. So now I'm just mixing some green for my grassy area here. I'm just mixing some phthalo blue and yellow to make this green grass looking color. And I'm using my flat brush. I used a flat brush for most of this painting, by the way, starting from my guidelines and to this point. I'm just using the flat brush because it's easier to kind of navigate or sweep the paint around, and it makes very good marks for the kind of painting that I'm doing. You can give it a try if you're interested to use the flat brush. So far it's my most favorite. So as I am working on this painting, I just want to get rid of all the whites as I mentioned. So I'm just going to add a little bit of color on those little buildings in the background and start working on these two trees that are the main elements of this painting, the pine tree and the other tree that is kind of right across it. For painting the tree, again, I'm using my flat brush, and pretty much what I do, I use this flat side of the brush to kind of imitate the form of the tree, the pine tree. And I will actually make a separate video on showing all the details of how you can use your brush for making these marks, for example for painting this tree or like this bushes in front of the tree, and so you can have a better idea of how you can use your brush to make these marks. And so what I do, I'm just trying to fill up these spaces, and I look at the colors and the tones that I see, and I just mix that color, and I paint that area with that color without going too much into what is the form of it and how many details are there. At this stage, I'm not going to worry too much about my details. I'm just trying to get rid of all the white space and finding the right colors to do so. So for that, I'm just looking at my reference photo and getting some ideas from that. As you see, I don't work on one area to complete it. I just go all around my painting, and if I see or notice something that needs to be worked on or changed, I just jump right in there and I add or make correction as I go. So for example, that pine tree, I just painted it up to this point, and I'll go back again and work on it more. So if you look at my reference photo, you see there's so much more details that I am still working to get there. Now I'm just going to work on the other tree. Again, I am going with very light color first, like diluted with lots of water, and as I progress, I'm just going to add darker tones to create more volume on this tree and make it more real looking instead of flat. And for the leaves of this tree, now I took this photo in the early spring, and the leaves were quite so fresh and they were just growing, and so there weren't too many leaves. But however, for painting the trees, as you see, I'm using my flat brush again, and I have mixed my very light green color, mixing yellow and phthalo blue, and I'm using the brush as sort of like a stamp. It's actually is like a stamp tool in Photoshop, if you ever used the Photoshop. So I'm just making some very light touches to get that form, or again, I'm kind of imitating the form of the leaves instead of painting each leaf, which is, I don't think it's possible, because you probably won't see each leaf, but you can create the form or how the leaves on the tree look like by just using the flat brush or a round brush. I will show it later on, how you can use it. And you just very lightly tap it with your brush. Sometimes you need the brush to be slightly dry, so not too much water, so you can get the right kind of stamp or the forms that you want. So at this stage, what I'm doing is that I'm just going, I'm using my very fine brush to add some of the other branches that are kind of in the background and they are lighter, and so I'm just drawing those. A fine brush allows me to have more control over my lines and making finer lines, and as you see, it actually does a very good job using this very fine brush. And so I just work a little bit on this tree, and I'll go back again to the pine tree and work more on that tree. So I'm back again working on the pine tree. What I do at this stage is that I'm just checking all the colors that I see on my reference photo. Do I have all the light and dark tones that I see on that photo or not? And I just find the mid-tones between each color too and add it. Now I'm going back again with my fine brush to add more details to my tree here. And what I do with my fine brush is that with lighter or darker tones, as you see, I'm just making these very fine lines. Here, now I'm using this round brush to again make that form of the little tiny leaves that I see on these bushes in front of these trees. And so what I do, I'm just tapping it very softly to get that pointy or like teeny tiny dots with this brush. I'm gonna use it on this tree as well, so it will make it look more realistic looking. I do the same thing with my pine tree because there's some areas that are just kind of like lighter or darker, and I'm just going to add more of those darker tones. So now that I have worked on the trees a little bit, I'm back on the ground again. I'm checking again all the colors. Is that grass exactly the color that I wanted or not? If it needs to get darker, I'm just gonna make it darker. I'm gonna work a little bit more on the things that are in the background, like those little buildings and all these bushes that are in the foreground. And they're kind of more red, and I'm just going to add some more details to these as well. So for the final stages of this painting, I'm just going to go back on the path and add some more light and darker tones and add some more arbitrary colors to make it more interesting looking, like that phthalo blue. And I'm gonna go back on the background as well, add some more color to those little tiny buildings in the background, and add some tiny more details on these bushes in the front of the pine tree, and just make them a little bit more, just give more accent to it and make them more clear. So as I said, I have used that photo as a reference, and now I'm just adding my own little thing on top of this painting, which was not in the reference photo. So I'm just trying to be a little bit creative here, and sometimes I think there are things I want to do and I try it, but it just doesn't work out. So if you stick around till the end of this video, you'll find out what did I do that did not work out as much as I was hoping. But now in this stage, I'm just trying to kind of fix it somehow, or see if I can get something out of it. So I'm just painting some little feathers that are kind of falling in front of everything, and they are right in the foreground. and it's silver. I'm not sure, you will probably not be able to see the silver color, but I am painting over it with some white to give that feather looking form to it. Alright, and that's it. I hope that you enjoyed watching me painting this little single point perspective landscape painting of the pathway that I have walked through, and I hope that you find it interesting. So this is the part that I was talking about. Here on this fabric, I guess I'm just trying to work with the pattern that it has, and I was hoping I could get an imprint from the pattern on this fabric on my painting here. So I'm using a silver paint to cover some of these leaves and painting them, and I was hoping that I could get a nice print out of it, but I'll let you watch it yourself and find out for yourself how it worked out for me. And as always, thank you so very much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. Till next video, goodbye.